Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today I want to talk about Humankind. Now, I just want to preface this by saying that this, I have only played about 20 hours of Humankind. This is just my early thoughts on it. I'm very, very far away from really getting a handle on it. But I feel like I understand the game at a core level enough to be able to talk about it and just sort of talk about what I like and don't like about it. So Humankind, what is it? So hopefully you'll have footage of that in the background, but basically Humankind is a 4X game, very reminiscent of things like Civilization, but it has its own spin on things and it does things differently, and I just want to talk about the things that are noticeable to me in this game. And I've been enjoying playing it. It's nice to play something similar to Civilization but different. In some aspects feel not as intensive, in some aspects feel a little bit on the easier side, but that's not to say the complexity isn't there, the strategy isn't there. The way the game is built just feels a little bit easier in some aspects, we shall say, and it's just a bit, right now it's a fresh experience. I have a list of things I just want to go through. It's not a complete list of everything in the game, it's just things that I think to me stand out, as well as the stuff that I'm remembering being there that I think is worth talking about. And in no particular order, so there'll be some good stuff, some bad stuff, things like that. So let's just get to it. First off, the art style for this game is fairly decent, in the sense that for the most part, it's very easy to see what the world looks like, what things look like on the map, tell the difference between land and sea, and essentially just be able to see what you're doing. It has it's got a combination of like Civ 5. It's got a very Civ 5 / Civ 6 art style in that sense. It doesn't go for a truly realistic environment kind of look, but everything seems easy and understandable from just looking at it. The only tiny gripe I have with this really is, when you're zoomed into a point, you will see what looks like natural landscapes, natural mountains, fields, things in the field. Like if you zoom in on a city and things, it all looks kind of nice. You zoom out far, to a degree, and you can kind of still see this. But once you start zooming out further than that, you have more of a topography or whatever the term is for it. It looks a lot more. It looks more like a map very quickly when you zoom out. And the reason for this is you get more information. Like when you zoom out, you see your land and all this different stuff, and your symbol for your team fairly quickly. So you can kind of see, oh, this is what I own. This is the different regions. Here's a different outline for a different player, stuff like that. But it does feel a little bit too quick. So sometimes I've got it at a nice distance, it still feels zoomed out. It feels like I've got a more basic map view than I have of a more detailed view of the world and stuff. But it's a very minor thing and not really an issue. It's just I wish it zoomed out a bit further before it became the sort of map view of the game. But overall, decent looking art style, no real issues there. I think the clarity's there. It can maybe get a tiny bit messy when there's a lot of trees around, but even then it's fairly easy to see what the difference is. There is a toggle in the bottom right corner of the UI that allows you to see what your cities and buildings have, like an outline around them, so you know where you've built, which is cool. Probably the biggest thing about this game is progression through the ages, and I think this is something that the game is very unique to the game, and it's a really cool concept. So what it is when you start off and you're in the Neolithic age, you are just a roaming band of people, and to progress to the first age to become a civilization, you need to essentially either find food and expand that way, have a bunch of combat, or find these things that essentially act like science. Now once you do that, you then pick who you want to play as, and you have access to a ton of different civs. So you have maybe 10 different ones, and they will have different styles and different bonuses in different areas, and this is where you start to make choices for your game. So let's say you pick somebody that's all about, I don't know, in this case, all about science. Okay, cool. That's really awesome. I'm going to focus on science to begin with and go from there. Okay, cool. So when you get to the next stage, and you do this by there are different objectives. Each objective gives you stars. Those stars, I think it's 7 or 8 stars, allow you to progress to the next age. What's cool about this is that, say for example, you pick a science-based one. Okay, you gain It's a little bit easier to get stars through science, okay, with this team. Maybe it's one less science you need. One less takes less time to get as much of the research, right? And then maybe you find yourself in a situation you go, actually, I need to focus on influence. So when you switch, when you come into the next stage, you have the ability to switch. You can stay as the same civilization of people, progress them forward. You gain bonuses from that. There's a downside to doing that, which is your units might not be very good going forward, your specific, unique ones. But then you can switch and you can change your strategy on the fly every time you hit a new age. And that is a really interesting concept, because it means that, let's say you have a lot of land. So you're going to focus on having the land stars, which is like agrarian, I think is basically what it is. It's like going around, joining up land to your cities. Maybe you run out of room to do that to start with. So you're like, okay, well, maybe I need to focus on something else. Maybe I need to focus on, let's say, military fights, so I can fight independent people and do it that way. Or influence, or money. There's like different ways of doing it, and there's always a different way. Like, you can get all the stars in each of these different factors during the age, and you kind of have to if you want to max them out. But there's whichever race you pick, essentially they gain a bonus in one of these areas, and that's you can be like, okay, I can easily get stars here and fame points here. Fame is basically a score, which is one of the ways of winning, and it's a really cool concept. And I really appreciate the fact that if you are struggling with one particular direction, if you can make it to the next stage, you can completely flip that on its head. And I think it's just a really interesting concept. It means you never really get locked into a specific team or style. Like, you can flip your style on your head. Now, Civ does kind of let you do this, but Civ's a lot more like, these are your race bonuses, this is what you're working with, you need to kind of plan around it. Whereas this, it doesn't lock you in. It might lock you into that for an age, but how efficient you are getting to the next age and switching up your strategy depends on how you're playing and how things are going, right? So that's kind of cool. And like I said, you do it through these stars, and it's just a really nice way of letting the player kind of express, because you might start off being like, I have to have a military style, I need to go out and kill things, get points that way, because that's the easiest way for me to do that right now. But then once you've maybe taken over an entire island, you're like, well, now I can sit back and start working on my city, start joining my land, all these different things. So you do want to switch up your strategy, and that offers a really, really cool play for that. Then there's what we have in the actual cities themselves. So I should probably talk about the outposts slash cities and how that works. So when you, apart from your first outpost, which you put an outpost in an area, the game will recommend the best spot in an area, and that will give you food and work and something else, I think. And essentially you put down an outpost that you kind of claim that area, and then you can either do one or two things. When the outpost is built and you already have an existing city, you can attach that area to your existing city and start owning those lands and essentially getting bonuses from those lands. Or you can turn each individual one into a city. I don't think that's the recommended way to play, but it's just not something I've really looked into. Usually you want your city spread out a little bit, but essentially the more outposts you build, the bigger your cities can get, the more things you can build, the more bonuses. And there is a downside to doing this, but we'll get to that in a minute. And this is another really cool concept, because so you might just need to work your way across the land and start capturing them, so you've got places to expand to. And this is, any unit can do this. Units basically work in the sense of, you click on a unit, you go, I want to set up a outpost in this particular area, and off they go to do it, and it takes a few turns to set it up. And then you have the choice, like I said, of expanding a city's current influence and essentially gaining more to attach to one city and having these big booming cities that are growing and expanding really quickly. Or you can, have multiple cities and work on things that way, which is really, really cool. And I like that, because it means that you actually have to think about where you want to go, where do you want to set up these outposts. Now, these outposts get more expensive the more you start putting down, because influence is a big part of the game here. Again, I'll get onto all the resources in a moment, but you need influence basically to do a lot of things, and to be able to create outposts and join them to your cities or create new cities from them, you need a lot of that. So there's a lot of thought process that goes into it, but it's a cool way of going, actually, I want to take these parts of this island or this part of the map because this is where the resources are. This might have a natural wonder in it. It might just be a really good place to take. So you do have a lot of decision making that comes from that. So that's awesome. Let's get to, actually, as we're on the topic of cities, when you have your main city or your outpost, that kind of counts as like the building in the middle. So it's still a hex style that you have. You can then attach essentially buildings to around your main city and have adjacency bonuses. Now this is really cool because the way that this works is that each city has the ability to build buildings in it and then buildings outside of it. So you get, like, say, farmers' quarters. So the more farmers' quarters you connect adjacency with, you're going to get a lot more food, or you might have science ones that give you a lot more science or influence or whatever it might be. And you want to do this because when you get world wonders that you can build, or certain buildings, they massively get boosted by adjacency bonuses. So maybe you have a building that's like gets X amount of food being next to farmers' quarters, but also gets maybe some influence by being next to the capital city, or the main plaza as they call it. So you want to line it up so this particular area is next to the main city and then surrounded by food quarters. And like this is a big part of this game is literally connecting up tons and tons of these quarters and making these big sprawling areas within your cities or within your outposts to gain big bonuses. Again, there is a downside to that, which is stability, which we will get on to in a minute. And but there's a lot of choice and a lot of play when it comes to this, because what you can do is you're like, well, I do need food in this city, but I don't really have the stability right now to plonk more of these outposts down. So you can build stuff in the main city on the main plaza that doesn't reduce that. So that is really cool. Like, the game has a really nice balance of allowing you to build extra districts that can have that adjacency that can lead to big game bonuses, but you can also use things in the city to stop you know, to just currently deal with things there that you need to in terms of work output, food output, things like that, without having to worry about stability. And as I keep bringing stability up, let's talk about the kind of resources in this game. And I don't mean like natural resources, I'm not talking like iron, copper, stuff like that. The game works kind of similar to other 4Xs where you have different ones, and the ones I can think of are influence, gold, science, population, leverage, and stability. Let's go through them. Influence is like a little blue star. This is essentially culture, but it's used for a lot of things. Setting up outposts, turning those outposts into cities, attaching those outposts to cities, dealing with civics, which we'll come back to. Basically, to me, influence is probably one of the most important resources in the game. You need it for so many things, and honestly, like, for me, like, my strategy usually revolves around getting a lot of influence to be able to expand quickly, to be able to get a lot of civics, to basically afford a lot of things. But it's just another resource. It's used. It's quite easy to get a lot of it as well. There's I think it's common quarters, or there are quarters that you can get that gives a big boost in influence as well. So fairly easy to do. Then there's gold. Now, gold in this game is useful because it allows you to, so you can either build stuff through turns or you can buy stuff through using gold. The problem is that sometimes I wasn't even focusing. The first game I ever played, really, I wasn't focusing on gold. I had a ton of gold and I had nothing, and not that I had nothing to spend it on. I just never felt like it was needed. Gold feels very secondary in this. Like, it doesn't feel like something that you know, and this is a noob talking about it. There's probably really good strategies that involve having a lot of money and buying stuff. But like, as a super casual at this game playing it, I was like, gold's kind of just there. Like, I'm sure it can give you the leg up you need. It can speed up the process for some things. It was good for buying army units, but it never felt needed. It never felt like, you know, suddenly you had like 15 grand in terms of gold, and I was like, oh, I'm not really focusing on that. I'm focusing on building up these quarters and influence and getting my population higher and getting an army, you know. And things don't take that many turns anyway, like 4 or 5 turns. So obviously, yes, you can speed that up. But gold's a weird one. I think I need to spend more like using particular civilizations that might utilize it a lot better. Then there's science. Science is what you expect it to be. The higher the science, the quicker it is to research things. So science is another one of those things, like the higher the number, the quicker. Basically, it's a resource. You can get districts for it. Very powerful, though sometimes it does feel like you are just smashing through the tech fairly quickly, and on top of that, what's really cool is that you can only get so much tech before you can move on anyway, because you're locked by which area you're in. So you might get the next couple of branches on a tree, but you need to move to the next area to actually get the next lot of research and things like that. Population is done differently in this game, so your cities will grow to big population, and you need this because every time you build an army unit, you lose population. So food is very important. You want to make your cities to grow. When they grow to a bigger size, everything gets done quicker. So you want to make sure you've got enough food for them. But yes, when you build an army unit, you'll get a -1 to the city. It's really not a big deal because you'll replenish that very quickly, especially if you're focusing on it, which is a cool concept. I quite like that. Your cities are constantly fluctuating up and down, depending on how you're building things, basically. Then we've got leverage, and I've got to be honest, I don't know much about it. It's not a strategy I've really gone through. Leverage is what you use against independent states, and also you use against other people in, like, when you're on the diplomacy screen. But I'll be honest, this is the thing I know the least about, and I need to spend more time with this. So we'll move on to stability. Stability is hugely important. A city has stability that tends to fluctuate up and down depending on what you're building. Most buildings you build will reduce your stability in your city overall by 10. When it gets down to below 30, your cities have in a very bad spot. But between 30 and 90 is kind of okay. You want it to be 100 most of the time, or highs. And then you get surplus as well, which is also good. And the way it works is essentially it will show you, this is all the good stability you have in your city, from these monuments, from these wonders, from these particular civics you have, or whatever else. And then it will show you where it's also being used up. So it might be like, oh, there's -20 for attaching this area, or these other districts. And this is something that's really important. You need to think about this, and this is why the game lets you build buildings in your cities as opposed to building them outside of the cities. Because when you build them in the cities, they don't create a stability loss, whereas building a quarters for the most part does. So this is a nice little balance. It's something you need to think about. It means that if your cities are getting very low and out of control, then you either need to detach areas, or you need to figure out ways to deal with it. But it's a mechanic I kind of like. If you focused heavily on food, or you've focused heavily on, making sure your city's safe and things, and your stability's high, then you can do a ton of things, like create a lot of districts and basically do things and not worry that the city is going to fall in disarray. So it's kind of nice like that. We spoke about civics earlier. Civics in this game are kind of cool. When you do certain actions in a game, it will unlock civics. It will give you 2 choices. So it might say something like, you can choose to go with this style of religion or this style of religion, and you pick one or the other, and they give you some kind of bonus. Or you might be like, with this particular civic here, you can it will reduce the cost of linking outposts is one option, or it can reduce the cost of creating an outpost and things like that. So you get options, and you can switch back and forth. They just cost to do it. And there's tons of these, and they all add big bonuses. They're all very different. You've got religion, influence ones, money-related ones, production, all this sort of stuff. And I really like how it's done. The fact that it gives you choices, it shows you what your ideologies and things, and that can affect your relationships with other people. But all in all, it's just a really fun system. Very simple, but I think it works really well. I will say something I forgot to think about when putting a list together for this game is the voiceover guy, the announcer guy. I don't know who's voicing him. I should look him up. Fantastic, very funny writing, very good delivery, very tongue-in-cheek a lot of the times, and really adds to the flavour of the game. Awesome. Really appreciate that. Right, where have we got to? So we've had the civics, and then we've got. Okay, let's talk a little bit about combat. Combat's interesting in this game. It's not like Civ, where Civ, your unit, their unit, you run them in, animation happens, done. In this, there's a bit more to it. It's a bit more turn-based strategy in that sense. Now, the first time I did combat, I don't think it worked properly. I don't know if I had a bug or something. I just couldn't get my guys to attack. But the way it works is essentially you can have like a group of units together. It can be mixed units. When they get into combat, you kind of place them and then you fight. A lot of the time, it's basically capture the flag for the attacker, I think. I tend to instant resolve fights. I don't think they work amazingly well. They always feel a little bit weird. But they are different to something like Civilization, where it's actually like you have to have more of a role within it, which I think is probably for the best. I think that's probably a good way of doing it. It just didn't feel necessarily that fun to do. So a lot of the time I roam around, right, and I get into a fight, I'll just hit instant resolution. If you've got other units, so you've got a stack of 4 units, and then you've got another stack of 4 units, if they're adjacent to each other or within an area, they will also join in the fight. So you do have to think about that, and there is a good combination of units in this game. But yeah, it's okay, I guess. I don't know if there's anything more to it, but I don't really... Combat's never been my favourite thing about games like this, so it's just there. We also have the UI. Now the UI isn't... I wouldn't say the UI is bad in the game. It's very clean, but I will say there's a lot of information overload on some of these screens, especially the city screen. It just looks a bit pants. I don't think it's necessarily awful, but it doesn't have its own sort of flavor, and it just looks a bit like numbers. It looks a bit because it's clean. It's very like spreadsheet looking. I don't know what it is. I just don't like that particular screen. The rest of the UI isn't that bad though. Most things are very obvious as to what they are. It's easy to click on things. It's easy to read what it says on the screen. But the city screen specifically is kind of a bit just... I don't know. I don't like it. I just think it's a bit messy. A bit... just doesn't feel particularly coherent. So it's just my thoughts on the UI. The rest of it, like I said, absolutely fine. No issues. Independent nations are an interesting thing in this game. So you've got yourselves, you've got your AI or human players, and then you have independent nations that will pop up. And basically the way these works, if they have a peace symbol, they won't attack you. If they have a lightning bolt symbol, they will go seek out your things. It'll be kind of annoying. But what allows you to do is that you can trade with these guys. So when you start trading with them, as you level up your essentially leverage over them, and you're just trying to create a good relationship with them, you get accesses to new treaties which give new bonuses. So you'll be like, oh, if you do this particular one, you get plus 30 gold, or you get plus science, or you get other things like that, or you can sway them to like you more, things like that. And this is really cool. This is a really good system. Depending on if you're fighting somebody for it, you try and get as many leverages as you can, and then try and get the highest treaty you can. If you manage to find one, if you can get right to the end, you can do one of two things. You can essentially assimilate them and take over that entire area, and they become part of you, or they sort of work as a vassal, I think is possibly one of the options. But basically, your end goal here is to get your leverage up as high as you can, and then use your influence to basically buy the treaty and make them into what you want. The downside to this is that, as I found out the hard way, when one of these places gets down to 10 turns, you can no longer buy a treaty because they're in what they call decay. I didn't know this, and it felt like sometimes I wasted my entire time doing it. Like, my strategy went out the window. Now that is a learning experience, and I probably won't make that mistake again. But I was kind of a bit just like, this kind of sucks. I don't think that this should happen. Like, I've still got 10 turns to make something happen. I shouldn't be punished for putting all this time and energy into this place. Why not make it so that it's like, 1 or 2 turns left, then they're in what you call decay, and then they're gone. And just let me just be able to continue to work towards trying to assimilate them or become best buds with them. So that's a bit odd. Don't really like that. It's not a mechanic I enjoy too much. The different personalities on the AIs can be interesting. They're kind of manic in some aspects. Some will want to trade with you more. Some will dislike you very easily. Some will try to be... I had someone who was in awe of me, which was interesting. And because then you can... if you've got a big army, or you're doing very well and you're ahead of the game, you can kind of just demand things from the AI, which is interesting. But obviously the difficulty level can affect that as well. But they seem like they've got a good, decent mix of like how the AI acts. It tells you when they feel differently towards you, and you can work on different things. There's a ton of diplomacy between yourself and AI or human players, which is really cool. You have different treaties. You could basically still fight in the open, but trade, or you could share maps and vision and all sorts of stuff. Like, it's actually kind of decent. I do like the fact that you can put demands in. It kind of ruins relationships with you and the opponent, but you can ask demands. You can ignore the demands and be like, essentially, someone's transgressed you. Oh, I'm just going to ignore it. It's fine. We'll wave it away. Or you can be like, no, I need them to pay up and give me these places. So there's some cool things you can do with diplomacy, which I definitely like. World Wonders are another thing part of the game, which is you basically claim a World Wonder, and then they give massive boosts to things like influence or faith or massive adjacency bonuses or other things like that. They're a cool concept, definitely worth looking into, but they can help out in some big ways. You've got your classics there like Stonehenge, pyramids, things like that, and some other ones as well. Just a fun thing. And then lastly, really, like, random events in this game are kind of fun. You'll get like things pop up saying like, hey, you know, you've got this new religion coming in, what do you want to do about it? Do you want to like kill off all the people related to it? Do you want to let it live? All this stuff. And you get all this decision making. There's quite a few of these random events. They give different benefits, some negative, some positive, some lead to more story events, things like that. And I kind of like that. I think they're kind of fun, and they pop up at different times, and they tend to lead to good extra bonuses for the most part, unless you have to deal with a negative effect. But yeah, they're kind of fun. There's more to this game than the things that I've just gone through, but these are just things that I think are important to the game as a whole. I am enjoying Humankind for what it is. I think it's a nice, fun 4X game. Rather than just playing Civ, they can play this as well. Nothing here is like at all a good strategy and things like that. These are the things that I think are important to the game. Played it for 20 hours, seemed to like it. I'm going to continue to play it and go from there, really. But hopefully this helps. If you're looking for something different to play that's like Civilization or a different or something, you know, just a new 4X game to play, I think this game's fun. I think it has its own mechanics, and overall has been a fun, enjoyable experience. And then hopefully when I'm 900 hours into this game, I'll be able to talk about it in more depth. So, but there you go, that will do it for me today then, guys. So thank you very much for watching as always. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, then hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description as always. And until next video, I will see you then.